But I want to ask you, so you told me about the coming out at work, feeling comfortable, but even coming out to yourself. Um, and we don't need to get all the gory details, but just sort of for people who might be listening to this who didn't have all of the support or have what is generally sounds like a very rosy conversation around your identity, how you show up. It's been sweet, but everybody has their story, right? And I'm not, I don't want to make this into a dark story. I just want you from your mouth, from your heart, to talk to me about, it's like sending that lifeline out to the person who doesn't quite have it that sweet, but just letting them know, for real, you don't really need all this. There's a straight path from where you are to where you want to be.
Yeah.
You know?
What's so cool now is that the world is changing.
Yeah.
And the world is more embracing. And I just think back to when I was in middle school. I think really middle school was the time where I figured out that I think I had always known I was different. But I think as my sexuality started emerging, like middle school was really the time where I was like, I'm realizing I'm definitely more attracted to this and not that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's different, and being able to articulate that in a different way. And it was super scary. It was super scary. I had that moment for sure where I was like, is all that's left for me just school, right? And I did well in school, but I wasn't like thrilled with school. And so I'm like, for whatever reason in my like 13-year-old mind, I was like, well, I'll never buy a house. I'll never get married. I'll never have kids, right? Like all these other milestones that like I had been kind of nurtured to look forward to. I was like, I'm not gonna have any of that. And then that question of like, so then why live? So I had my dark moments in there. Like it's not been a completely rosy story. And I was fortunate that with a couple of people I felt like I could tell, both from friends, from my youth minister at church, some other people, my uncle, who was, just really lifelines for me. And this was before the It Gets Better campaign, but it very much was that story. It was like, you're still here. You're here for a purpose. God is going to use you in just such an amazing way. Hold on, and like, you'll get there. And it didn't take terribly long for it to get there for me, which was great because the world did start changing. And I grew up in church, and now I'm a licensed minister. I'm in the process of becoming an ordained minister in my church. And so I had all of that in my ear as well, right? The way that Black preachers in the Black church in particular were preaching about and against homosexuality in many instances, and those who weren't necessarily preaching against it weren't really saying anything for it either. And so there was this whole part of my identity where I had cognitive dissonance on like, I am a good person, right? Like I'm a good person. I'm out doing good things the way that I was raised to do them and to interact with the world. And then I've got this other part of my identity that I'm not quite sure what to do with. I'm not sure how that fits into me being a good person or not. Does that make me a bad person? Does it cancel out all the things on the other side? And my parents and I are good now. And it took a while, I think, for us, and said all the right things and all of that. But it was new for them, and I think part of the thing that we don't talk about is there's your own awakening when you come out, but there's also like, okay, now I've told you, now what?
Now right? What? Right.
And so when you go somewhere and you're challenged by your friends and they say, thinking about your daughter, right? And they go, oh, she's beautiful. When is she going to get married? When is she going to make you a like not anytime soon, but like, out there, right? And like, what do you say then? If your daughter came out to you, so I think my parents were figuring out, because there wasn't language that existed for that. People say, you've got these 3 handsome sons and they're so successful and all this stuff, and why aren't any of them married? And my older brother just flying around career, Disa was still too young, but for me it was like, so what do you say? What do you say to people that's like, how come he hasn't found a nice young lady to settle down with at this point? And so there's some grace that we have to extend. The way the TV would play it out is that I would just immediately tell you that, Mom, Dad, I'm gay, and they'd go, all right, son, like we love you and this is great, and like everything would just change on a dime, and it's just not how it works in real life. So there is a piece of like, my parents had dreams for me, right? They had a dream and a vision for how my life would go, and I think they understood that as a Black man in the world, it was already going to be a tough journey, and they did everything they could to prepare me for that. They didn't know how to prepare me for being gay.
For this, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so there's fear there, you know, that's built into that process around your safety. It's another thing that, you know, you have to continue with in the world. And so, you know, for me, I had to understand the dreams that my parents had for me, and that they were wrestling with. Are they still the same dreams or not? Mm-hmm. And what does that mean? I will be married. Mm-hmm. I'm working on that now. So like, another story. I will be married. I will have kids, right? And so like those things will still happen. It's just happening differently than 35 years ago, how we imagined it when I came into the world.
That's a beautiful story.